About the immune system. It's long overdue. We did one of these similar a little while ago, and we're going to add more to it. We want to talk about 5 pieces that people can introduce on their own, really on their own, that are very effective. These pieces are going to seem simple, but we're going to jump into all the nuts and bolts of them. So I am Dr. Glenn Harrison. I'm the owner and founder of the Center of Functional Medicine in Westminster, Colorado. And my co-host, Dr. Norris.
Howdy.
Yeah.
So I'm Dr. Norris Golberg, and I'm the owner and founder of Koru Chiropractic, and we are a neurologically based practice in Louisville, Colorado.
Mm-hmm. All right. So there's a few things we're going to talk about today. These 5 pieces and why they're so important. We see this all the time. This is all about the immune system. So we're going to tie it back into the immune system consistently. The first thing is foods. This seems so simple.
Very.
What are your thoughts on this, Dr. Norris?
Well, first of all, Doc, I just wanted to take 1 minute to remind everyone that we will definitely do an open Q&A at the end. But as we're going through these foundations of health, feel free to, if you can find the chat button, you can enter a message. And if we see it in time, we'll try to answer it on the spot. Okay. So get back to food. We all know food is thy medicine, right? As Hippocrates said. So food is one of these elemental building blocks to our body, to our cells, and nutrition, right, is just so vitally important to the just overall health, but especially the immune system. And I talk to my patients a lot about that because it does affect their spines and their nervous systems. But I know for you, Dr. Harrison, that's like your bread and butter. I mean, nutrition is really the foundation of your practice. What do you see? I know we all know like the sort of stereotypical stuff. And again, we're going to talk simple, layman's terms, but we're also going to go deep and complex on some of these things. What would you say is one of the biggest mistakes that you see people make with food, especially during quote unquote, cold and flu season or just stressful immune stimulating times?
The biggest problem that I see with food is people are forgetting that food can be a poison. Meaning when I say it's a poison, it can distract your immune system, and your immune system spends all of its time fighting food. And I would say a big percentage of people's immune systems are being compromised just because it's attacking food. I guess that would be the easiest way to say it. If there's one thing, there's so much to do with food. It can preoccupy your immune system. It can compromise it, make it weaker directly, or weaker just because it's preoccupying the immune system, if that makes sense. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, and I know at the end we're going to kind of come back and hit some of the high points, some of those takeaways that people can be doing like today, tomorrow. That's a big thing for us because with our practices, we're so specific. We really specialize in a certain type of care, and we're really able to help people in a very, very specialized type of way. But the reality is that there's a lot of things people can do on their own before they even come into our practice, and it may help them out tremendously. And then there's going to be a lot of people who do all the things we recommend, and they still need our help. So we'll mention something about that a little bit later tonight as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. So that's really foods. I think the biggest thing that we really want to consider with food is, I'm still getting savvy with this whole.
I was going to say, let's see that presentation.
Yeah. So the big thing with foods is the preoccupying our immune systems here. That's the biggest thing. One thing that you could really take away from foods, the easiest thing to do would be to avoid a food that preoccupies yourself. And if there was one thing, it would be high amounts of sugar. And don't underestimate the components of sugar. It's not only white sugar, and it is things that turn into sugar in the body. Processed grains do this all the time, every day of the week. Mm-hmm. What do you see a little bit more about foods, doctor?
I talk about that same thing in my practice talk. Sugars and processed foods in particular, as we both know, create a a low level of inflammation in the body. And we say low level because it's very different than, when you get a cut or an infection where you have this high level of really acute inflammation. We're talking low levels of acute chronic inflammation. And you and I both know how that physiologically or physically deteriorates the body. So one of the things how it affects me is it really starts to erode the spinal joints. It starts to affect the health of the joints themselves. So not just spinal joints, any joint. So one thing I always recommend to my practice members, if they are dealing with arthritis, is getting on a anti-inflammatory diet. And there's a lot of just anti-inflammatory foods out there like turmeric, pineapple, little basic things you can add to the diet. And then in some cases, when we know we're dealing with maybe some very severe chronic components or even autoimmune issues, that's really when we throw it back into your court and work at it from a really different angle and get some more specific details, lab testing, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me ask you, I was feeling a little stressed last night. I'm sure everyone is these days. I was feeling a little stressed last night and ate a whole pint of Talenti ice cream. Is that good for me or bad for me?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. The stress alone creates a craving.
Right.
So when we're contained like we are right now, we crave foods that'll drive up our blood sugar. The sugar gives us a little bit of a fix. It gives a dopamine response, a serotonin response. It gives us that emotional uplift, but it creates a consequence, the consequence of your immune system busy fighting sweets.
Right.
So just with that analogy, what do you think, Dr. Golberg, about everybody contained right now and their state of mental stress? How is that playing into their cravings and their immune system?
I mean, it's through the roof. I mean, I'm personally stressed. I mean, we all are, right? And so stress eating is my weak link. That is like my thing. So, having a little pizza or a little ice cream or something like that. Now, in context, that's 1 or 2 meals out of the entire month, maybe, right? So, just to put a little context on it, but I'm seeing that a lot, whether it's stress eating or just emotional stress or, physical stress. People are feeling extra right now. Everything's just a little bit cranked up. Everything's like a level 8, 9, or 10 instead of a 5, 4, or 6, right? So there's definitely some components. Now, I know one thing that we always get into when we're talking about food, and the reason we're talking about sugars and processed foods is because really, in a way, those are toxins to our bodies. But, newsflash, it's 2020, everything's toxic, right? So how do you focus on toxins? Because I know toxins can have a small amount of toxicity can have a huge effect on your immune system.
Toxins are, they're with the modern, I know we talked about this before, the modern world we're in, it's not a matter as if we're toxic, it's a matter of how toxic we are.
Right.
And toxins, how they maybe affect the immune system directly, if there was only one way, they're an irritant. And our immune system sees a toxin, maybe kind of like too much sugar, that's a toxin. In fact, anything can be a toxin if it's in the right concentration. Vitamin C can be a toxic. So if the body sees the toxins as an enemy, the immune system mounts a response to fight the toxin. So there's another avenue where your immune system is so compromised just because it's preoccupied. The sugar could be one thing. Enough emotional stress could be another. But now the toxins play directly into it. Anybody that's toxic will have a weak immune system. It's really
and I know, and you kind of back me up on this, a lot of the worst toxins, the most poisonous stuff is fat soluble, meaning that it actually can connect and attach to fatty substances. And in our body, nerves in our brain are primarily fat. So, and really even the outer lining of all of our cells are a fatty layer, right? So when we get these fat-loving toxins, it's like a magnet, right? It just sticks right to our cells or gets right into our cells. And we can't process it out of our bodies as efficiently. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. Fat-soluble toxins are the worst.
Right.
There's so many different avenues, and the more powerful the chemicals that are out there, and not even talking about foods anymore, but synthetic chemicals, the harder it is to break down, because the fat-soluble chemicals are the ones that are the biggest problem. And our industry is making more and more resistant chemicals to break down. Now we have these human bodies that are part of nature, and they don't even understand how to break and process these chemicals because it's so foreign to us.
Right. And a lot of them are just they're not identifiable, right? Because it is this foreign substance. I think I saw a documentary not too long ago about Teflon and like DuPont, that big company, create a lot of synthetic chemicals that are in our waterways that we can't get out, and that every single human has traces of these toxins in their body. It just depends on how much of you have, right? Which is a pretty scary thought. And this is not even just in America, that now these chemicals, these toxins, they've actually traveled around the world. So I don't want to make people feel worried, like, oh my God, we can't avoid these things. Those are small trace amounts. But thinking about like Monday morning applications, we're going to come back to this, but there's definitely some toxins we can cut out of our diet right away, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely ones we want to avoid. Like obviously, if we're here in Colorado, we're fairly safe, but if you lived in Flint, Michigan, don't drink the tap water, right?
Yeah. And there's a few things to look for if you are unsure if you're toxic or not. Well, we can kind of create an assumption that everybody is somewhat toxic, but is it playing into your symptoms? A lot of people don't realize that if they are dealing with an energy problem, they're probably going to be toxic.
Right.
The energy is required to clean the toxins out of the body. So if there's low energy, there's going to be toxins just because it's your body can't clean them out. Another thing is skin disorders. I see it all the time when people start cleaning up their diets and their life and their gastrointestinal health and their energy starts climbing, their complexion changes. I've seen it at 90 years old, 95 years old. And of course I've seen it at 20 years old. So that's another symptom. And I think you probably see levels of toxins and a lot of musculoskeletal symptoms associated with it as well, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think of it because I'm not doing, in most patients, we're not ordering a lab test, or if I do, honestly, I just refer it to you. But what I see a lot is when, I'm just trying to collect my thoughts here for a second. I don't want to go too deep on the biochemistry, but what's so cool and what people oftentimes don't understand is that our bodies, every little cell, right? We've got 5 trillion cells inside your body. Every little cell is like this little chemistry factory, and there's thousands of chemical processes and reactions going on every single second. So honestly, I'm amazing at biology. Chemistry was my weak spot when it came to the health sciences. I love the concepts of it, but I hate doing the math and titration, all that just drove me crazy. So, but when you are thinking about chemistry and you're thinking about toxins, a lot of these toxins, what they do is they inhibit normal chemical processes, right? So that's where we start talking. You mentioned energy, and we're talking about ATP conversion. We talked a little bit, but we actually went in pretty good detail about that last time. And I know there's even toxins, chemicals out there that can inhibit those processes. All of a sudden, you're not producing enough ATP, which for our viewers who are watching, ATP is like the gas in your gas tank, right? I mean, that is the fuel, that is your energy source. That is energy. That's point blank. So not having the proper processes to create these chemical reactions can really, it's like putting oil all of a sudden in your gas tank. Your engine might not even start anymore, right?
Yeah, for sure. You have to have that energy. It's directly connected. So
now, one thing I see too in a lot of my practice members is, and talking about stress, is sleep, right? A lot of people not getting enough sleep right now. And it's kind of contrary to what a lot of people would be thinking. I do have some people saying they're getting a lot of extra naps in right now, but I have a lot of people also saying, I'm not sleeping a wink at night. Like I go to bed and I'm tossing, turning, they're thinking about their businesses, they're thinking about unemployment, whatever, we all got strife in our life right now just because of the current situation. And there, I've actually had a colleague say just the other day ago, he's like, I'm trying to figure out how I can sleep less. And although I love that spirit as an entrepreneur and a businessman, I'm like, yes, that's a great idea. I also know as a doctor, that is one of the worst things we can do for our body. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Sleep is, we sleep 20% less than we did 100 years ago.
Wow.
That's just one issue with sleep. Sleep is necessary to regenerate every tissue in the body. It is the most powerful antioxidant known to man, and yet everybody's running to the store and buying antioxidant supplements. Now, those are great. They're very powerful. But those same people are sleeping, anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a night. That's just not enough. So sleep is a fundamental piece of the immune system. There's so much research on sleep deprivation and immunocompromise. We see it with students. I know you saw it when you went to school. I see it when I go to school. Chronic fatigue leading to immunocompromise, and a lot of chronic fatigue is due to sleep deprivation. So there's a lot of simple strategies we'll touch on at the end when we go through these things, you can, like, as you said, you can do Monday morning.
Right. What I know with sleep too is we just kind of touching back on the toxins, and you talked about the antioxidants, but if we can go a little deeper on that, when you're sleeping, and oftentimes people are familiar with the analogy, like your battery's recharging. It's not your energy level. It's not just resting the brain. It's really when a lot of your cells, they've been working hard all day, like doing your awake cycles. During the sleep cycle, that's when they're cleaning themselves out a lot, right? That's when they're really, polishing up all the hardware and making sure it works right the next day.
Completely, exactly. It's almost like remodeling, reorganizing, right, putting things back in order after its crazy work day. And if we don't have that opportunity to reorganize, reestablish, refill the day after day after day after day of sleep deprivation, it just builds and builds and builds. And it's the same reason why, if we're sleep deprived, one night of great sleep isn't enough to recover. I think we all appreciate that, because the body is in a negative right now. It's still in a negative. It's still reorganizing. I like that. I'm thinking of an office reorganizing after a crazy bustle day.
And it's not as simple. We used to always say, I'm going to catch up on a little sleep, right? And maybe you take a nap the next day, or you sleep 4 hours the next night, and then one night and the next hour you sleep 12, and it averages out to 8 or whatever, or 6. And we know now through science that that's not how it works, right? And what we need to do, sometimes I did read a really interesting article a couple months back that naps were a really effective way to just do a little bit of recharging. But you can't, it's not like one for one. It's not like you're sleeping for 2 hours and you recovered all that sleep, and it's not as effective. So really, we'll talk a little bit about the end, how many hours you need. And also, let's not forget to talk a little bit about sleep hygiene, okay? Because I think that's a really hot topic right now.
Yeah.
And something that could really be something everyone could be applying on Monday morning.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And the next one is water. It seems like such a simple concept. And it isn't. It really isn't.
Right.
We see so much problem with hydration. Now, what are some of the best sources and maybe the worst sources of water that you would say, Dr. Norris?
So, let's first address how important water is, because I think it's like underrated, especially here in Colorado. We all get thirsty. We all get, we go on our hikes. We know we need to stay hydrated for sports performance, but I don't think on a day-to-day level, water is appreciated for what it really is, right? So water is a fundamental building block of the body, just like carbon is. And 60% of our body is made up of water, and actually 73% of our brain and our nervous system. So that's how I always relate to it, because if you're dehydrated, kind of like a raisin or a prune, right? It's going to start shriveling up. Well, that's what happens to our cells, right? They start shriveling up. And not that your body is going to shrink, but let's just go back to it one more time, chemistry, right? And if you don't have the right chemical elements in there, if you've got a lot of waste products and not a lot of that fresh water, it's not going to keep things running properly. So I kind of mentioned gas in the tank. I seem to always draw myself towards mechanical analogies. I'm kind of a mechanical guy. I know you are too.
Yeah.
To me, water is like the oil, right? Because if you don't have fresh oil in there and that water gets really like cruddy and brown, the engine's going to seize up, right? And so same thing, you want fresh oil. You don't want any sediment, any filtration in that. And so when we get to water, you asked me what were some of the best sources, right? So I've researched this a little bit. One thing, and I'm going to defer this one back to you in a second, and we'll say why. You have to avoid tap water, right? Tap water is no one's friend, okay? And the second thing you have to avoid is bottled water. So I know it's hard. It's like, okay, so then where do I get my water, right? Because it's bottled water or tap water. It's like, which one is it, right? So really what we need to think about is there's two really good sources of water. It's going to be either, well, there's a couple different sources. So we have distilled water, right? We've got spring water, and then we have like things like filtered water, things like reverse osmosis and ionization, things like that. So the problem, and I think you'll agree with me on this, distilled water, really good for doing, using it for things you need water and ingredients, but because it's been distilled, they've taken out all the vital minerals and nutrients from it, right? So you don't really get your bang for your buck when you're just drinking water. You're only getting the H2O. You're not getting any of the electrolytes or anything like that. The problem with the bottled water and this goes into both health and environment, with bottled water, for 1 liter of bottled water, they say it actually takes 3 liters to make that plastic and process the water. So it's just a really inefficient way to take care of yourself. It's a really inefficient way for the planet to take care of itself. And I know here in Colorado, people are really conscious of that, right? So we all have our, I got mine right here, right? We've got our reusable water containers. Yeah. I don't know anybody who doesn't walk around with one of those in Colorado. And, they say, 3 to 4 liters a day is ideal. The next thing you can do is you can invest in a bigger system. So for us, we use spring water. It's cheap. It's simple. It's supposed to be 10,000 years old, right? It's older than any of this pollution, these toxins that are out there. Comes up from the ground. It's full of vitamins, minerals, nutrients. So I'm okay with that. For me, that's good. I'm okay with that. But I know some people want to go even deeper, and especially people who have certain sensitivities to parasites potentially, right? Parasites can be in water, certain chemicals, even hormones. Most water sources actually test positive for hormones like estrogen.
Yeah, it's frightening. It's absolutely.
Yeah, people flushing their birth control down the toilet, and actually even just from normal human excretion. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if you want, and I have patients who do this, invest in really nice water filtration units. So you can get a reverse osmosis where it takes all the bad stuff out and leaves the good stuff in. You can get reverse osmosis for a couple $100, but it's kind of bulky. Or I was doing a little research. They've got these alkalizing, which means that it changes the pH of the water, and ionizing, which changes the electrical conductiveness of the water. And they're like $2,500. I mean, they can get pretty pricey, right? So it really just depends on each person. I think that's when it comes into a little bit more of a customized recommendation of what someone really needs for water. But certainly, like I said at the beginning, the biggest thing you have to avoid is tap water. And that's because, and I'm going to let you take it from here, but that's because of the chemicals in it, right? The chlorine, things like that. How does that affect our gut? Because this is actually, not that I didn't know about it, but only in the last couple months has it really sunk into me like, wow, I should not be drinking this water.
Yeah. Chlorine is designed to be a poison. That's the only way I can put it. Chlorine is designed to be a poison, and it's a very, very good poison.
Yeah.
And it's designed to kill bacteria so we don't die from some kind of bacterial infections. And as a result, it's eradicating all of our bacteria that we're made up of. So it creates a lot of problems. And so tap water is water, but our bodies don't like it. It will compromise us. There's, in fact, and I know, Dr. Norris, you know about the tumors associated with the sacrum. Is it the sacrum that's associated with fluoride?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a specific tumor exclusively associated with fluoride consumption and fluoride use. So we really got to take a good look at this. And if we compromise our gut, and that's probably one of the easiest ways to compromise our gut in the modern world, is a consumption of chlorine and fluoride in our water. We eradicate our guts. Our guts make up, research is showing, anywhere from 70 to 90% of our immune system, which is remarkable. So poor digestive health is a major pillar, a major piece of maintaining any kind of gut, any kind of immune system. You have to have a gut, and it has to be healthy. And there can't be some random or some weekly episode of diarrhea. And you have to have a bowel movement every day, not 6, but 1. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, maybe 2 or 3. But they should be formed. I talk about poop every day, so that's normal. But there should be, that's normal. So many people have bowel problems and digestive problems, and it's not something they talk about to their friends at the coffee shop because it's but it's real. And when I was in practice to start with, I would ask, how are your bowel movements? And everybody would tell me normal. And of course they're telling me normal because everybody thinks their bowel movements are normal. Not necessarily. We shouldn't have any diarrhea, and we should have at least 1 bowel movement a day. If we don't have that, there's a gut problem. And up to 70% or 70 to 90% of your immune system is lost. So we see Americans on average, statistically, 75% of Americans have some form of digestive disorder. Well, that means 75% of Americans are immunocompromised. It's that simple. And then when we got these viruses coming through our society, they shut down the world overnight. And we're just sitting ducks. So that's why this conversation is so important.
Right. Well, one of the biggest things when I look at, COVID's real. It's a crisis. It's a healthcare catastrophe that's going on right now. But when we look at the people who are really the majority of the people who are being affected by this are immunocompromised people, as we know. Unfortunately, they're a product of the system that we live in as a society and as a healthcare system. And for many of these people, and I know you see this all the time in your practice, for many of these people, a lot of their health issues started with, a heavy dose of antibiotics. And they say, there's a statistic I often share. I think it's a little, not old now, it's 4 years old. It's not that old. But it's, I think from 2015 or 2016, 250 million doses of antibiotics were given out that year. And they went back and they looked at it. This is from the CDC. This is from the Center of Disease Control. They went back and they looked at it and they found that half of those doses were inappropriately prescribed, meaning that there was no causative factor saying that this person has a bacterial infection that needs antibiotics. In a lot of cases, they found out they were viral infections and had viral signs and symptoms. So we know that if you take an antibiotic, it's not going to treat the virus. The second thing, though, is that it wipes out all of those healthy bacteria in your gut. We mentioned this last time. In your gut, you have more bacterial cells than you do entire cells, your whole body. You actually have more foreign invaders inside of you right now than you do your own body parts. And I think that's fascinating. I think that's amazing. And that's where that chemistry, we should just do a whole presentation on chemistry next time, because that's where the chemistry comes back, right? Because they're creating chemical compounds, even things like vitamin K, right? And B vitamins, those are created in the lower digestive tract, am I right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you go and wipe the gut out with antibiotics, you may be setting yourself up for a serious accident, right? Or at least potentially putting yourself in harm's way.
Always, absolutely always. Health really, the major player in health is the gut health. And if it is compromised for any reason, every other system in the body falls apart.
Right.
We talked about foods. You can't have foods if you can't have digestion. And again, a lot of people run to supplements looking for health. That's not where health lies. That's just that's kind of a bridge. There's so many supplements, people can't even get the benefits to them if you don't have enough, if you don't have enough biodiversity. And back to that gut health. But that's a bit of a tangent from water, but it spirals and everything. I know a lot of people probably come into your clinic, Dr. Norris, and they're concerned about spasms and cramps, and they're worried about hydration issues. How does that? How does your practice play into hydration issues? Because I know it does.
Right. So that's one of the things we got to figure out right away. When someone's coming to me with spasms and cramping, best thing I can do for them is ask them, are you drinking enough water? Because believe it or not, I've got people all the time and maybe someone who's already under care and they're like, oh yeah, my shoulder, it's been kind of tweaking out a little bit and my calf muscle's been cramping. And, I asked them a couple questions and it turns out they haven't been drinking water properly, or they went and did something, maybe did some extra physical activity. They went hiking, but they didn't up their water intake. And they may not be feeling it in the same area that they necessarily worked out, right? So you maybe go for a long hike, you're not going to get leg cramps. You may just dehydrate your whole body and all of a sudden, you're getting some like forearm cramps in the night and you're worried that maybe something's going on with your arm or your neck. Yeah. And it could be from your arm or neck. So that's something I always have to rule out or rule in. Is it a hydration issue? Is it a misalignment issue?
For sure.
And as we know, the compensation of those muscles requires hydration to keep it supple and fluid, right? We can't have nice, healthy, tender, or not tender, but like soft, supple muscle without it being properly hydrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I never thought of that. You can work out, and if you get chronically dehydrated, there can be random areas of the body that are creating all this tension or spasms or pain, and we don't associate it with dehydration because we say, oh, well, I wasn't working that muscle. So right. What's going on? Yeah. Yeah.
I moved in just the other day ago, and, breaking a sweat, not drinking enough water, not thinking about those things. And I was putting some IKEA furniture back together, doing all the turn bolting, right? And I was getting a cramp in my hand here, in my hand muscles. And, made me think, you drink some water. And a lot of people would have been like, man, I'm just turning the screw too hard, or I'm gripping this thing too tight. Or they're just frustrated that it's like the 15, hex bolt they put in a row, Yeah, but the reality is they just need to drink a little more water in a lot of cases. Like that's the first thing I tell people to do. Honestly, have you drinking enough water today? It's like number one question.
Yeah. Well, what percentage of our body is made up of water?
Right. 60%. So And you got a good bet. That's more than half.
Yeah. So it's necessary. So the next thing, movement. We can't live without movement. We can't regenerate tissues without movement. We can't be hydrated without movement.
Right.
Without movement, we can't even have nutrients. If we're not hydrated, you can't get nutrients around the body. That's why these might seem like very simple things: foods, toxins, sleep, water. But what we really want to do is kind of drill down into really what these mean in more complex strategies and how it affects. So, Dr. Norris, I know you have a long history of physical activity, even being trained in strength conditioning. What do you see? If someone isn't getting enough movement on whatever level, because I know we talked about this before, what are you seeing as a symptom? How does someone know if they're not getting enough movement, with larger, muscle groups, or even on the microscopic level? It's a big question.
Right. So movement is so wide ranging. We're going to talk about a couple of different movements here. So my background, before I became a chiropractor, I was a strength conditioning specialist, and I played semi-professional rugby. So as an athlete, movement was everything, right? I mean, we've got our aerobic exercise, you got your anaerobic exercise, you've got stretching, strengthening, lengthening, right? Like it can go on and on and on. And then we can really boil it down to the smaller movements within the body. So in your world, things like digestion and excretion, right? We got to keep the good stuff coming in, and we got to get the bad stuff out. And then really in my world, now that I'm a chiropractor, I'm thinking about movement, not so much in terms of the whole body, although I address that. I really think about it on the what we call intrasegmental, or joint to joint level, right? Because I'm looking in your spine, you have over 100 joints. So I'm usually looking at where are these one or two joints that are really fixated and causing this problem, because that's really what a misalignment is. It's a lack of motion. It's a lack of movement in the spine that irritates the nerves, and that irritates, it impedes blood flow. And then there's the cascading effect, right? And now we can get all these subsequent signs and symptoms. But when it comes to just generalized, or I like to call it globalized movement, right? Because we're thinking your body is this whole body global system, just like a planet. When you're looking on the global level, there's some basic things that we need to be doing, especially right now while we're sheltered in place. We can still do all of this right now, okay? So the American Academy of Sports Medicine actually recommends typically 20 to 60 minutes of aerobic exercise every day. People, if you're feeling like if you're losing your breath going up a flight of stairs, if you're having trouble getting up from a chair, like a kitchen table chair, or even, for example, the toilet, without using your hands and using a support system, or pulling or pushing, that's a sign that there's a lack of aerobic endurance, and also a lack of strength, right? In different ways there. So definitely we can do 20 to 60 minutes of aerobic. That's 150 minutes a week. That's basic, like walking. Okay. So I know a lot of people are getting out and walking right now at the shelter in place. I can see that from my apartment views. We've got a really nice outdoor walking area. So a lot of people taking opportunity of that. For people like myself, who maybe have a baseline level of endurance, we may be looking to increase the activity, or maybe your time is limited, right? If you don't have enough time, one way you can really still get the exercise you need is by upping the intensity, right? So this is not for everybody, but instead of doing a mild to moderate intensity, if you did more vigorous exercise, some high intensity interval training, not necessarily like CrossFit, although that's definitely high intensity training, F45, Orange Theory, those are just brands. You don't have to do those things. You can do this at home, right? But the message being that those higher intensity vigorous trainings really get more bang for your buck. And that's really where we can reset the body to get those chemical processes back on track, right? And motion is lotion, as I always say, right? That's what keeps the body moving. That's what keeps the blood flowing, the guts are moving, your nerves are getting the fluids they need. There's really nothing in your body that motion is not required. So when we're right now so sedentary in our lifestyles, it's more important than ever that we're getting up and getting some motion.
I completely agree. And
yeah,
there's a reason why when we go for a long plane ride, well, maybe nowadays, well, not nowadays, we're not doing anything nowadays, but even 1 hour flight, or a 3-hour car ride. There's a reason why we feel so crappy on the other end. And it has nothing to do with too much of movement. It has everything to do with a lack of movement. We are tired, and it's not like we're exhausted. And that fatigue is all coming from recovery from not moving. So yeah, motion. I see so many people that have terrible diets, they have crazy stress in their life, but they're getting enough exercise, working out enough, and they do well. They do well just because their joints are moving and everything else is moving. I don't know. I don't think we really had a chance to talk too much about the smaller components of movement, like vertebrae.
Right. So that's I kind of touched on it, but that's how I focus, because we know, and this is where it can really get into somehow it gets more complicated. I was talking about just generalized movement, and this is something that unfortunately is pretty hard to fix yourself, but through trauma, or we call it micro or macro trauma. So through micro trauma, let me rephrase that. Through macro trauma, things like car accidents, sports injuries, right? That's where you get, big collision and one of the bones gets slipped out of place, a little bit fixated, and then we need to realign that, right? What I'm seeing a lot right now is people coming in who've been, working on their laptops, on their couch, sitting at a kitchen table, trying to do their work because they're not in their normal workplace, right? And so what they're doing is they're all hunched up and bent over, and they're spending 8 to 10 hours like that a day, right? And all that stress and strain, what we find is with time, that lack of motion results in fixation, right? And that fixation creates a misalignment, right? It holds your spine out of place. And then there's a subsequent effect from that. It starts irritating the nerves. It starts creating some localized swelling and pain. And that's usually when people come visit me, right? Because they haven't been able to find a way or solution to fix themselves. One of the biggest recommendations I can make for people who are in sorry, I got a caller here. I can't even mute it. One of the people here, things that people can do on their own when they're thinking about their spine that I really recommend is things like Tai Chi and Yoga. So simple, very gentle movements. You don't have to have a big baseline of physical fitness, and doing 20 to 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week can really wake that spine up and wake that body up. And it's good for everything. It's not just the body, but also the mind and the spirit.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So I guess now that we've gone through everything in depth, now some things that we can all jump into and all apply immediately. And they seem simple, but hopefully we shed some light on the importance of them. So maybe the first thing with foods, one of the simplest things is I suggested that anybody can start doing Monday morning. If there is one thing, I could talk about this for days, but if there's one thing, sugar. Look at the sources of sugar you're getting in your diet. And instead of cutting it out cold turkey, don't do that, because sugar acts as heroin in the body. It really does. It looks like heroin. It acts like heroin. It's highly addictive. It plays into the brain and everything else.
Doesn't research show that it's actually more addictive than heroin and cocaine?
Yeah.
In rats? Like, that's how powerful that substance is. That's not a joke. That's like real.
It is. So you don't want to, I never, ever would ever want anybody to stop sugar cold turkey. So if you're adding external sugar to anything that you're making or cooking, cut it down by 50%. That'll be a big enough challenge to the body. Cut it down by 50%, whatever level you're at. That's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is look at any kind of processed food you have in the home. And if you're eating 3 meals of processed food a day, cut it down to only 2 meals of processed food a day. And processed food meaning anything in a box or can or bag. That's really what I mean by processed food. And I don't care how organic it says on the can or the box or the bag, it's still been processed. And there had to be some form of other ingredients put into it and fillers. So I think those are 2 simple things that everybody can do. Look through your pantries and reduce the sugar intake. Your immune system.
Now, real quick, Doc, one thing we talked about was avoiding big mistakes. And I know a lot of people make the mistake of substituting an artificial sweetener for a sugar. Can you just touch on that just for a second?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, was that artificial sweeteners?
Like an artificial sweetener, like maybe some I know are different. Like there's stevia, but then there's also like aspartame, right? Like they're probably a little bit in different categories.
I think there are so many. I think if you switch if you're going to an artificial sugar, if the goal is to maintain the sweetness, but you want to do it with less of a, a negative effect on the body, time and time again, stevia tends to be one of the safest. Right. They're all going to create a blood sugar spike. They're all going to do that. But it's going to be a lot better than high fructose corn syrup. It's going to be a lot better than even table sugar, but be very, very careful of the stevia you get. I learned this through a client of mine years ago, that where you buy your stevia matters. The stevia that is going to be from a grocery store that isn't necessarily reputable as a health store, a health grocery store, they're actually outsourcing their stevia. It's the lowest bidder. They're processing stevia with petroleum, believe it or not.
Wow. I had no idea. I always thought that, it's all natural, quote unquote, right? So I typically get mine from, Whole Foods or Sprouts. So I'm hopefully that's
you'll be good there. Yeah.
Clean, but just maybe nervous. I don't use it that much anymore because I cut coffee out of my diet, and that was really the only thing I was putting in. But sometimes now and then we'll try to go natural. So we'll add honey or like agave or something if we're cooking with sweetener. But I think for people as well. Yeah,
I think those are some of the best sources. If you can find it from nature, you're probably going to do pretty good. Yeah.
Right. Now, what about toxins? What's something we can do right away to help with toxins?
I think something you could do right away, if you're already looking at the food component, you've already cut down a lot of your toxic exposure. I think the next thing you could do is do a little bit of an inventory of what kind of personal care products that you have in your house, and look at starting to remove some of those. One of the biggest things, I say it over and over again, is your toothpaste. Your toothpaste, if you look at how conventional, I'm calling it conventional toothpaste, like the main brand names, the Crest, the Colgate, all of those, when they make that stuff in the factory, they are using hazmat suits. That's how toxic the toothpaste is. But then you put this toothpaste on your gums, which are highly vascular. It's just it's a conduit for those chemicals to get straight into your bloodstream. And then you put it there. Anything you put on your skin within 26 seconds is in your bloodstream. So with personal care products, is probably one of the places that people can reduce their toxic load the fastest. And don't just grab everything in your house and throw it out. That'd be pretty expensive. But look at what is the first thing that you can pull out and remove and exchange. And there's some great sources. Whole Foods have a bunch. My clinic has a bunch of that stuff now. I carry it on hand. I think personal care products and laundry detergent and stuff like that are one of the fastest places you can go.
There's I probably shouldn't mention it because I don't know exactly what it is, but there's an app out there, and it tells you when you scan a label of something if the product is like it has toxins in it, if it has certain I wish I knew the app. I apologize for even bringing it up because I should know. My wife has used it before though. It's really cool. You just scan the label and it'll tell you if it's Annette is saying it's from ewg.org. So Annette is an interior designer that we both work with, that she actually does like eco-friendly and allergy-friendly products. So, for example, trying to find you a couch that is not full of formaldehyde in the foam, or a rug that's not just full of plastic, right? So the EWG, when you take a picture of the label, it'll tell you right away if there's stuff that you didn't even know is in it, like if it's got a bad rap as a company or whatnot. So it's going to be really, really valuable for people. And I encourage people to check that out if you want to be shopping a little more consciously.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then maybe the next thing is sleep. What can we do with sleep? And you hit a high note on sleep hygiene.
Right.
First rule of thumb is recognize how we slept 100 years ago. Try to mimic it. So go outside, find a nice tree, and have a sleep. that would be the best way. The first thing we're going to do, we have to mimic what human DNA needs. And human DNA needs should ultimately be going to sleep with the sun. We can't do that necessarily. Maybe lately people could have.
It's pretty good timing now.
Yeah. So we have to follow the sleep patterns as closely as we can, and we need decompression. We need to decompress in our sleep. First rule of sleep: get 8 hours. That is a challenge for most. Probably the vast majority of Americans have a hard time to do that. And then the second thing is on the front end of your sleep, the hour before you go to bed. So allocate 8 hours Look at what that morning looks like and what that evening looks like. And the hour before you go to sleep, the only thing you do is prepare for bed. Not dishes, not laundry, no task-related things, no projects. And in that hour, you should mimic nighttime. So the lights in your house should be turned off, and there shouldn't be any screen time, blue light, any exposure coming from any kind of electronics. Those electronics are neurostimulants, and they wake you up. You might fall asleep, but you won't get into true, high quality sleep.
That's the thing. I was going to say, Doc, just sorry to interrupt, but we're not talking about not sleeping. It's not like you look at your phone and you have insomnia like the whole night and you're like up till 5 a.m. and then you fall asleep for an hour. We're talking about just poor quality of sleep, and that is just as bad as no sleep.
That's very true. So many people that they'll come into my office, they'll say, well, I'm sleeping, doc, I'm getting 7, 8, 9, 10, and I still feel tired. And it's causing X, Y, and Z problems in their life and in their health. And then we start to drill down and see, what are they doing before bed? 90% of the time, it's what they're doing before bed. It has nothing to do with the time they're allowing for sleep, and they are beat. And then with all the technology and all the apps, and they'll go for sleep studies, and everything is bad. Every sleep wave known to man, and I'm not a sleep specialist by no means, but all of those waves and all of those findings in the medical community become abnormal. Their sleep data becomes terrible. And it has nothing to do with a lack of medication or a certain wave or any of that. And it has everything to do with the state of the mind and the body prior to sleep. So right. The sleep hygiene on the front end is very important, but don't ignore the sleep strategies on the other side, meaning when you wake up. So our bodies like to follow a circadian rhythm. And if we don't set our morning up properly, our bedtime won't be proper. So I get a lot of people, they'll get their heart rate up within the first 15 minutes they wake up in the morning. And it's not designed to be a workout. A workout would be great first thing in the morning, but it's designed to turn the body on. If the mind is on, like in our modern conventional, our modern society, our bodies don't turn on till about 11 o'clock in the morning unless we're exercising first thing in the morning. We might walk across a parking lot, walk across the kitchen to our coffee pot. That's about as far as our bodies metabolism starts, and that doesn't turn on our bodies. Our brains are on, but our bodies aren't on. And if there isn't a very distinct timeline in our day of when our bodies and our minds turn on, there cannot be a very distinct timeline of when our bodies turn off. So that's why some kind of cardiovascular activity first thing in the morning, it's going to seem ridiculous when you do it, because I do it, and the first time I did it sucked for one. And what the heck am I doing this for? And it doesn't have to be much. I have people that have stairs in their home that go up and down their stairs like 3 or 4 times as fast as they can. Within the first 15 minutes, they wake up.
Right.
Or they'll do standing squats. So one thing, you either want to get your heart rate up, and become winded, or you want whatever muscle group you're working become exhausted. Either way, that is going to get enough blood flow in your body's going to be like, okay, I'm on. And that's going to actually play a big role in how you can fall asleep, the depth you can fall asleep. And now we even see how it's playing into in sleep, in the waves and brain waves with our sleep.
Well, and I'll really give myself personal testimonial to that, because with our recent move, we don't have our antenna's not working anymore, so we have zero TV, and I try to minimize my screen time anyways. But I've taken it as a little initiative here while we are still sheltered in place for the next couple weeks. I was like, you know what, this is a great opportunity for me to cut the cord, right, and just completely unplug at night. And what I've started doing is about a half hour before, I haven't worked my way up to an hour yet, but about a half hour before, everything's off, phone's gone. I try to do some light reading and brush my teeth, floss my teeth, do all that personal hygiene stuff, right? And then same thing when I wake up, I don't check my email right away.
Yeah.
That's a big one, because for a lot of us, especially if you're a business owner or if you have a certain responsibility at work, a lot of times we're drawn towards that email, like apply to honey, because we're worried something might be wrong or something might be good. It doesn't really matter. It's like this bell that rings when you soon to wake up. And that's one of the worst strategies you can do. It's super distracting. It sidetracks your whole day. The rest of the day, you just do emails instead of doing things that are productive and actually healthy for your body. So what I've also been doing, just to double down on that, is I've been doing right away, as soon as I wake up, I'm doing a 20 to 30 minute walk with my dogs, and there's some hills and stuff. So I'm getting a little bit of activity. And before my knee injury, back in December, I was doing HIIT training. That was my morning routine, was HIIT training. So huge advocate of all of that. And like we talked about from the very beginning, when we're thinking about detoxifying the body and how most of that process happens when we're sleeping, if you have poor quality sleep for 8 hours a night, that's 8 hours of you not cleaning and filtering your body, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why that fatigue starts adding up, because you don't have enough of the chemical processes going on, like creating adequate ATP levels, and you feel sluggish all day, right?
Exactly.
So it's not, the requirement is not more sleep, and it's not more caffeine. It's just better quality sleep.
That's true. And I know, and I think there are even some questions on filters, blue light filters, glasses, right, screen covers, and all of that. So, they are good. I recommend use them all day. They'll save your eyes.
Right.
Don't use them as a replacement for that 1 hour decompression. Those filters and apps and screens, they're better than nothing, but they don't even come close to the avoidance model, just for that one period of time. So that,
and I think too is just a side note. I know when I've researched blue light filter glasses myself, just because it is such a buzzy thing right now, there's a lot of cheap, like scammy kind of stuff going out there. So if you're looking into blue light blocking lenses or glasses or screens for your computers, I hate to say it, but usually you're probably going to pay for what you get. And if you pay a little bit more, it's the nicer, higher end glasses that are a couple $100. If the $20 pair is just a blue filter, it's not the same thing. It's going to hurt your eyes, because you're going to be looking. It's going to be like a clown show. You're going to be looking through these things that turn everything like dark blue.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing is things like hydration strategies. What would you say, Dr. Norris, is something somebody can start Monday morning and start getting benefits of it?
Right. So a couple things to think of. I think it's 1 ounce per pound, right? So, or is it kilogram? I can't remember. Shoot. But you want to drink a lot of water. Honestly, what I try to do, this is just a little bit over a liter here, and you want to be putting down 3 to 4 liters a day optimally, at least 2 minimally. Again, trying to avoid tap water. And the other thing is trying to avoid plastic water, just because of the PBAs that are in plastic, and how that is going to then spin back into the toxic cycle again and actually start affecting both your immune system and your nervous system. So again, you don't have to go invest in a huge reverse osmosis or alkalizing system. Just simple spring water can really do the trick.
Exactly. And with regards to water, sometimes we get confused and we're trying to calculate how many ounces and all of that. The rule of thumb is just keep a bottle of water with you at all times. Yeah, a decent water, and that that will create a remarkable change. Humans are not good at knowing we're not good at knowing our hydration status. Research time and time again shows that animals, most research has been done with dogs, they're able to identify their hydration status better than humans. So just keep a bottle of water with you at all times, and take it. It's like your third arm. We here in Colorado, we're in a very, very dry climate. And we usually don't know we need water till it's too late, as a rule.
Right.
Yeah.
And Michael chimed in. He said, how many pounds divided by half? And that's kind of the formula I was thinking of, because I grew up in Canada. So you, Doc, kilograms, which would be almost 2 pounds, right? So a kilogram per ounce. And that's if you want to really get into the numbers and the minutia of it. But I like the way you're saying it. And that's how I often would think about it. If I'm out hiking or, camping or something. We talked a little bit about talking about poop. Well, we got to talk about pee a little bit. And if your urine is not like pretty much clear, usually you're dealing with a hydration level. And especially if you're like, oh, it's yellow or dark yellow, or any other color than that, you've got problems, right? You got to figure that out. So that's a good way for you to sort of spot check if you're not counting the ounces.
I completely agree. That's going to be the best, because the ounces per pound per kilo, whatever part of the geographic world we're in, it doesn't add up, because different genders have different hydration statuses. Different your muscle mass will play a role in someone with lower muscle mass. The activity level will play a role into it. The climate you're in will play a role into it.
Yeah.
Your overall metabolism will play a role into it. So ounces per pound or kilo doesn't add up. It's a kind of a government regulation, or the American Medical Association threw something like that out, and now it's a thing. But yeah, I would just keep a bottle of water with you, the indigenous cultures, they never had bottles, but they have always lived around a stream and they were the healthiest. And the next one is movement. Now, this is a big one. I know you have a few strategies. You even have some content that you've given people in the past. What is something simple that someone can start that's not going to be overwhelming? Maybe some people haven't started anything consistent. Consistency is king with all of these. It's not how much you do once a week or how much you do once every twice a week. It's what you do a little bit every day. Consistency is king with these. I just want to put emphasis on that.
No, that's a great emphasis. And you're right. It doesn't really matter. Those ACM recommendations, it's everybody's different. Everyone's unique. And the biggest thing that I find is like, you just got to get up and move. And I promote what we call spinal hygiene, very simple to things like dental hygiene, where you're brushing and flossing twice a day. And it's a pretty simple procedure. And it's just about consistency over time is what actually prevents you from having major dental issues. Well, spinal hygiene is the same way. When I'm really thinking about movement, not just in terms of your whole body, but your spine in particular, doing these basic exercises, simple things, bending side to side, forward bending, just gentle twisting, right? Those are the 6 ranges of motion that we need in our body. And in my videos, and if anyone goes to my website, I'll give you these videos absolutely free. There's a request button at the bottom. If you go to those videos, you can see, and I probably talk more than I'm showing you how to do it. If you cut out all the talking, it's probably like 3 to 5 minutes of actual movement. And if you do yoga or Tai Chi, I think you're all set. You probably have it figured out. But if you're not doing any of that stuff, this is a way that it doesn't have to be a commitment to a studio or a certain practice. It's just the commitment to yourself and keeping it consistent and keeping those very basic movements that are essential to our body.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then another thing that I see is people that come into my clinic, pretty well everybody has made significant lifestyle changes when we come in. And then when we get in, they say, "Oh, Dr. Harrison, I do that. Oh, Dr. Harrison, I do that." Like, "Oh, yeah, no, I get exercise. I've done that." The key is I've done it. Doesn't mean the key that I'm doing it steady every day. And that's where the magic happens. So all of the strategies we're saying here, they might seem very simple. We tried to drill down and to put emphasis on them, but nothing changes until you change. And the magic from these human, I want to call them human strategies, these real strategies, is consistency. We have to turn it not into a fad, but a lifestyle. And I've seen remarkable changes in so many individuals from an activity standpoint, the outcomes of activity, just by going for a 10-minute walk every day, because they never did that. They would go for a 30-minute walk once a week. That doesn't even come close to a 10-minute walk a day.
Right.
I would say a 10-minute walk a day is going to be more effective than a 2-hour hike once a week.
Right.
Consistency.
Just to match that, I had a practice member come in who I told him probably 2 months ago before this all happened, "Hey man, you're probably gonna see a lot less of me. Really consider doing," I just said yoga because I knew it was the easiest recommendation. I have to get into, what stretches or exercises. I said, "Hey, just like you're a young guy, just try yoga." And he's kind of he's a kind of a biker, tattoo type of guy. He didn't want to get into the flow of yoga. Well, I saw him for the first time last week, or just yet on Monday. And he's like, "Yep, been doing yoga almost every day, just like 10, 20 minutes, a couple little stretches I learned. And I feel really good. My back doesn't hurt me anymore, or like as much as it normally does." And I was like, listen to that. Go figure, follow the recommendation and see what happens.
Yeah, consistency is king with all of these things. So really do kind of like an internal inventory and ask yourself, okay, they seem simple, but how consistent am I with them? And that is where, when you find a weakness, that is the thing to focus on. But don't overwhelm yourself. Health doesn't come in fads. Health doesn't come in diets. Health doesn't come in fad exercise regimens. It comes in integrating little things that you're going to be consistent with. I can't stress that enough.
And balance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I oftentimes tell people, even with a really strict program, I don't like to deter them from being really compliant to it. But I say, it's like the 80-20 rule. If you can do 80% of it, like really strict, and you waver a little bit on the 20%, you're still doing pretty good. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot better than where you had come from. Now, of course, we want to cinch that up and get 100% compliancy, especially when you're coming to getting into more complex chronic issues like you see with some of those gut issues. You know, there's not a lot of room for wavering in some people, right?
That's true in the early stages. Yeah, they got to walk a line quite a bit.
Yeah, walk the line. But, you know, I think in terms of just general recommendations, I think people really beat themselves up when they really, like, it's a pendulum, right? They swing really hard to one side, they fully commit, they go for like 5 days, hardcore, vegan, yoga, exercising 5 times a day, they're doing everything in their life, and then just all derails and they go back to worse sometimes, not even as bad as they were, but even like further down the hole.
Exactly. And I'm seeing this happen right now with this whole pandemic issue where people are completely falling off board out of everything they've done. And then depression sets in, anxiety, frustration. But one good habit, when it's lost, it gets replaced with usually a bad habit. And that when you lose one good habit, it's paired with another good habit. So if people are eating healthier foods, they naturally are going to, or I should say if they're exercising or getting some movement, they actually crave foods with more substance and a healthier food. If they're sleeping properly, they have fewer sweet cravings. So naturally that gets paired with a better diet. And when you lose one of these habits, when you fall out of it, you actually lose a couple good habits, not just one, and it gets replaced by bad habits. So it's consistency is king, and turning it into
Absolutely.
a life.
Well, hey Doc, I see that we're pretty much out of time here.
Yeah.
I know that we've both want to help more people because people are really suffering right now. People are really feeling locked up and not have a lot of answers to their health. And hopefully everyone learned something from tonight and really took something away from it. I know that's always the goal of my presentations is to walk away with some powerful knowledge. But the reality is a lot of people tuning in probably need our help too. And a little bit more than just hearing a webinar, or maybe even more than what we're about to offer. But I know that I'd like to extend to the people viewing tonight that if you think you maybe need my help, maybe you're not even sure if you need my help, you just know that there's something off with your health. And if you want to talk to a doctor, to myself for 15 minutes, I'll even give you a little more time if you need it. But for 15 minutes, I'm happy to talk to you, answer any questions you have going on with your body, with your health, and really figure out what would be the best route for you. Do you need to work with someone like myself, someone like Dr. Harrison? I'm always your biggest advocate in terms of finding out who is going to be that best person for you. And I'd love to be your guide in helping you do that. So our information is on the screen that Dr. Harrison has up right now. And please feel free to reach out to me if you need any guidance. And Dr. Harrison, I know you got a similar offer.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Opening up that door to answer some questions, and a lot of people have symptoms. They don't even think that they can turn them around. They just think this is just the way it is, or they don't know if there are any strategies. I guess that's the biggest thing, or if there's a connection between symptoms. I'm offering the same thing, 15 minutes, and I've only done this once before. The last time we did a webinar, you and I, and you probably have to. Best way is either to call, or if you go to our website, there's a sign up form for that. But if you are interested in it, just call us by the end of the week. In fact, well, I guess in my office anyway, we're not going to be in on Friday, so just give us a call. You can call us or leave messages anytime for today or tomorrow, and we can get that scheduled.
Great. I know my email is not up there, but it's really simple. Info at the website. So info at Koru Chiropractic. That's always a great way to reach us over the weekends. I check on that pretty regularly. And same thing for us. We're going to be in the office tomorrow seeing some essential visits, and just glad to be helping people out. We're glad to be back in practice.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's excellent. I don't know if we had any questions here. Let me see.
I've been keeping a pretty close eye on it, Doc. There was one about slow waves, and honestly, Michael had a great question. He sent me a message privately, and it's something new that I have to address. It's not the normal brain waves that I'm familiar with.
Okay.
It sounds really fascinating, and I'm going to have to do some more research on
slow waves. I do know that they're influenced a lot by emotional status. That's what I know. I do know breathing exercises have influenced them. I do know that they're crucial for sleep, but sleep can't be dissected from just one wave to another. That would be kind of like dissecting bacteria out of the digestive tract, saying, oh, this bacteria does this and that bacteria does that. And it does, but they all work together.
Yeah, it's a synergistic approach, right? You can't
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to isolate it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I think that was.
I think that's it. We got some great feedback. Definitely everyone check out that EWG app. That's a great resource to have if you're worried about safe and healthy products. And just glad everyone tuned in too.
Yeah, sure. And if there's people are looking for more information, there's a lot of information on my site, www.drgharrison.com. We have videos on there. We have videos on labs, on supplements, on our YouTube channel. There's a link there. I think I have over 100 videos right now on different health related issues, a lot of immune support videos as well. So there's a lot of resources there. So, yeah. Well, awesome, Dr. Norris. It's been great. I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, we'll have to, as long as people are sheltering in place, I think we're going to have the demand, and obviously you can see lots of people chiming in saying they're loving the content. So encouraging for us.
Okay, awesome. Well, I hope everybody has a good night, and stay tuned for the next one.